Hey, as the historian here, today I have for you all a recent conversation I had with Team Liquid's Mizenhauer. For those of you who might not know him, Mike is an incredibly talented writer who publishes primarily for TL.net and TeamLiquid.com, specializing in StarCraft 2, World of Warcraft, and Magic the Gathering. We had a long but entertaining and informative chat ranging from region lock's effect on Korean players to Mike's personal relationship with soO. If you've been enjoying my work, be sure to drop a like and get subscribed. With that being said, let's jump in to My Word with Mizenhauer. Okay, so Mizenhauer, thanks so much for taking the time today, man. I appreciate it.
And thank you very much for having me.
Of course.
I was just gonna say, after years of interviewing people, it's time to get interviewed, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. The tables have turned. So the customary question: how did you first get involved with StarCraft?
StarCraft 2 was interesting in how I got. I had never played an RTS before. At least seriously, I played Brood War once or twice. But I had played WoW pretty seriously from about 2008 to 2010. But I'd given up on it a little before StarCraft 2 came out, and StarCraft 2 was just a big deal. It was supposed to be a great game. It was, supposed to be this, really cool thing, and so why not? A lot of my friends were interested, and I started playing as well. Started out just playing 2v2 mostly in 2010. Somewhere along the way, started playing more 1v1. But yeah, I'd say pretty much have been playing the game consistently for now 13 years.
That is quite some time.
Yeah, it's a lot of games. It's a 25K or more probably if I add it all up.
That is definitely significant. So I know you mentioned to me in the past having authored a couple novels before you ever really even got started writing with TL. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so for me, writing really started out as a hobby. I had quit my job as a office manager at a chiropractic office, and I was kind of just looking for something that was, I guess, just different. Not showing up every day and doing these pretty simple tasks and stuff. And so I started writing. Just didn't really think much would come of it. But, so at first I was working on a novel a little bit, and, I'd work 3 days a week for an hour or so. But within a couple months, it was just every day, 3 to 4 hours. And when I finished the book, I would start editing it, and I'd already have an idea in my head for the next one. That was basically what I started out with writing-wise. And in 2015, I remember there was a post about hiring on Team Liquid for writing. And at the time, I think it was a combination of not being completely confident in my abilities and also just, didn't want to put myself into this, big community with a lot of structure and everything. So I didn't apply, but, I was playing Fantasy Proleague and all this stuff, so I kept my eyes on the site. And then towards the end of 2016, maybe October, November, I decided to bite the bullet and applied for Team Liquid for writing.
Well, there you go. It's been a pretty long and fruitful partnership.
Yeah, I think other than Wax, I may be, and maybe some Brood War guys, I may be the longest tenured writer at the site, which I take some mild pride in.
As you should. So why do you think you ended up writing as a vocation?
I was always interested in fantasy and a lot of science fiction settings too. I'd say Dune was one of the most influential books for me as far as my views on a lot of things, ecology, religion, just many subjects. And, I had started reading The Hobbit when I was really, really young, before I was done with 5th grade. I read the whole Lord of the Rings stuff. So, I wasn't a writer, so to speak, but writing was just a fascinating thing for me. It was a very interesting topic. And so, like I said, it started as a hobby, but, once I kind of got going with it and found a way that I could express my own personal philosophies into writing, it became really cool. It became a really rewarding experience.
It sounds like it, for sure. I mean, obviously, it works for you. It's been going on for so long now. Yeah, I mean, so you already kind of covered the biggest or some of the biggest influences on you with writing. Any other sort of journalistic influences that you think influence the way you report stuff?
Yeah, so I've always been a fan of ambition in projects. I personally respect someone who is ambitious and fails more than someone who would, stick to the safe, tried and true stuff. Um, I like taking chances, and I think that really translated into my writing. At Team Liquid, I started out doing previews before, really doing. My first project was about the Legacy of Void and the economy changes and how it was titled the eulogy for the sixth pool, and that was my first long form piece. But I guess the second was the article about soO that I did while I was in Korea, and that one had really incredible response to it. And from there, I was kind of emboldened to continue writing those kind of things.
So you mentioned soO. I know you and him have a bit of a relationship. How did that come about? How has it developed?
So yeah, like I said, I joined Team Liquid towards the end of 2016, and the first article I wrote was in a Lima League Lima League preview, and it was it was the final four for it, and one of the players was soO, and I think in Korea, Team Liquid the name of Team Liquid holds a lot of weight, and they really look at it as old school serious establishment that so they put a lot of weight into it. And soO had actually browsed the preview, so he knew my name. And before he started streaming on Twitch, which would be the period after Proleague dissolved and people started streaming on Twitch, he streamed a little bit on Africa. And I was in one of his streams, and I messaged, as crazy as this sounds, I messaged him. And he said when the stream was done in game, and he said he had read it. And so when he switched to Twitch, I guess he already had the lead of his fan club as a Korean moderator, so to speak, but he didn't have English speaking moderator. So he actually kind of let me handle that responsibility. And so we became friendly through that. And when I went to Korea in 2017, Lichter, who was the person who I first interfaced with at Team Liquid when I joined, great guy, and he was basically like, hey, if you're gonna go to Korea, why don't you try to do some interviews and write some stuff? And that's kind of what birthed the idea for the project about for the article about soO that I ended up doing.
That's really cool. I think a lot of people are sometimes too intimidated to do stuff like that. They'll just reach out to somebody that they idolize.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I feel like I hear it a lot. People that are pleasantly surprised that it turns out the person was just a person and they were nice and they were able to develop a relationship.
No, exactly. And I was really shocked with soO's willingness to participate in the article. I interviewed soO and Gumiho for just a standard finalist interview that was pretty short, but Africa helped out, let me speak to them and all that stuff, and that was really cool. The interview with soO himself, which I ended up having Verakunda translate, went on for about 3 hours. And soO was even nice enough to let me come to his apartment and kind of watch him prepare for the finals. And that put even more context behind the situation. And, my favorite little story to tell about that is how I suggested a build that he ended up using in the finals and winning a game with. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. That is definitely awesome. So, of the kind of huge variety of, tiny little pieces of the StarCraft community, it seems like Korea and Korean StarCraft is the one that, for many others, for you resonated the most and sort of felt like the most significant. Why is that, do you think?
I definitely, I would say when I joined Team Liquid, and by joined I mean started looking at the forums around 2015 or so, I was just full blown Korean elitist. because, coming from a history of playing Magic competitively and playing WoW at a reasonably high level and stuff like that, like I just cared about seeing the best of the best. I wanted the highest quality, and so I never really watched streams of these Western players who, in many ways, I think a lot of people liked because they had personalities, they spoke English, they were easier to relate to. But for me, it was all about, just seeing the best possible StarCraft. And so I really focused in on Korea very early on. And, there was actually a point in 2016 where I was like, I'm going to make sure to look back at every GSL, SSL, and Pro League game from 2013 to 2015. And over the course of that summer, I watched every game, and it was it was thousands of them, but it was an awesome experience to kind of follow StarCraft as it was evolving in the Korean scene.
Yeah, I can imagine that would give you a pretty unique perspective.
Yeah.
And a pretty memorable summer.
Oh yeah, lots of games. Yeah.
So you've had I think a lot of passionate opinions, hot takes over the years. You called yourself a former Korean elitist. Are there any opinions or public stances you took that you sort of regret making?
Well, I know most people are gonna assume the one, the whole Rogue article, but to get a little background first, like I said, I really appreciate ambition, and so for me, I never really wanted to do safe articles. I wanted to write articles that had a different perspective and maybe challenge the conventional view, but. So, some were very universally liked, and others were, not so much. But I don't really look at things as regrets. I think everything is a lesson. I'm still very proud of the writing in the Rogue article, but it did teach me certain lessons about, how a message can be diluted by taking by just even throwing one word in can really dilute the message of what you're trying to accomplish. And so yeah, like I said, it's about lessons and it's about learning how to do stuff. And but yeah, I still hold some very strong opinions about players to this day. I think soO is a winner who just happens to lose in finals. I liquibet basically based on perceptions that are 5+ years old, that I'll just stick to and refuse to change. But no, it's been wonderful at Team Liquid to be able to write especially about players I really like, and even if it's someone, I wrote a couple articles out about Impact at one point, which I don't think anyone would have thought would happen. In fact, the title was, yes, this is an article about Impact. But no, it was really cool. Then Team Liquid was a great platform to express these strong opinions and take chances. And I had editors that trusted me and worked with me to, be able to express these strong opinions.
That totally makes sense. Are there any opinions that were controversial at the time that you, in hindsight, feel very vindicated for harboring?
I've never been the biggest Dark fan. I admire very much what he did in Season 1 of SSL in 2016. Playing Lingbane when no one had seen it before was really incredible, and you rarely see innovation in a final. Not the player, you see him a lot in finals, but it's very rare for a player to take huge risks and try out new stuff in a final, and I really respect Dark for that. But looking back on, I think he could have done more. Definitely. He's only won Code S, I believe, 2 times. Also has, an SSL final he lost to Solar. Has the one he won also against Stats. Also lost one to Stats. But anyway, so, I've kind of had, like I said, I have these long-held beliefs about certain players, and I'd say Solar is another guy. He didn't do so great in Pro League. I respect his eccentricity and his willingness to do things a little differently. But I think as time is borne out, he's not quite a tier 1 player. There are a few others. Like I loved Rogue for a long time, and I think it was cool to see him evolve, but still keep to his roots. So I really would say a lot of my opinions are informed by Heart of the Swarm period and early Legacy of the Void. So 2014 to 17, and maybe I'm a little unwilling to let go of those, but overall I think I've been pretty spot on with some of them, and when I've been wrong, I accept that. But yeah, I mean, I'm currently 1 point behind the lead in Liquibet, so I think these long-held opinions are working out okay for me.
So speaking of criticism and controversy, Blizzard has sort of been at the end of a lot of it over the last few years. Mm-hmm. Do you think the level of criticism that's been sort of leveled at Blizzard over the years has been justified?
Well, I mean, as far as the more mainstream issues, I mean, it's hard to, make excuses for the way women and other people have been treated in the workplace. But as far as exclusively to their video game stuff, I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective, because not only have I played a ton of StarCraft, but I've played a ton of World of Warcraft. And overall, I think Blizzard has at times mismanaged StarCraft. But there are things I think there are balance patches that were not so great. I think Legacy of the Void was a terrible decision. If you look at the things people most commonly complain about in Legacy of the Void, from Zerg, for example, the ability to expand so quickly, to get so many queens, these weren't things you were able to do in Heart of the Swarm. You had a much more limited economy. You had to choose between what you were going to do. And I think that increased the level of strategy a lot. So to this day, I mean, I enjoy playing Legacy of the Void personally. But I think if people really reflect on, like, what are the core issues, a lot of it comes down to the economy and your ability to do so much stuff at once, instead of really having to pick and choose. Like the CC first, you'll see it once in a while, but at the end of Heart of the Swarm, it was a very much like CC first had distinct advantages, whereas opening with a barracks had its own distinct advantages. And I think the way the economy works, it's like, oh, I can just get a Reaper, I'll be safe, and then I can just, expand and it'll be fine. And luckily now we're like 7 years into Legacy of the Void, so there's been more experimentation and more evolution. But yeah, during those first couple years especially, I was really negative about it. But in the end, I really can't complain too much about how Blizzard handles StarCraft outside of balance. I think region lock was a very good decision that ended up working out great. The Korean scene was already declining way before region lock was instituted. And I don't know if you would have seen players like Serral or Raynor, and maybe, all kinds of names like that. I don't know if they would have committed full time to StarCraft the way they did, if they were just, if for the early years of their career, they were just butting heads against these Koreans who were just, beating them up constantly.
Yeah, it's just not a feasible living, right? If you, pour your heart into it and you get top 24 or 32 or 16, whatever the format is, and you make a couple grand and once every 6 months, it's just not possible.
So I think years later, the Korean scene is where it's at now, which is, I think, a natural evolution of where it was then. But Europe's doing really well, and there's some, I wouldn't even call Serral and Raynor younger guys. They've been around for a long time, but there are younger players who are competing in a lot of online cups and stuff. And I think that's cool, because ultimately that's where StarCraft is going to go. More crowd-funded things, and it's great with, Masters Coliseum going on, and, there was just the $4,500 prize thing. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of really good fan stuff, and that's, I think, is going to be at the heart of competitive StarCraft going forward.
Kung Fu Cup, the Pigsty, the Wardy Invitationals.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
A lot of awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So, you kind of mentioned the state of the Korean scene as it is, and the sort of the downfall over time.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that StarCraft 2 didn't have the long-term social impact and mainstream love that Brood War did?
Well, I think Brood War is the definition of catching lightning in a bottle. Even the most casual person who has, some knowledge of Brood War probably knows the anecdotes where Blizzard was like, we did not think this game could be played this way. It was a game that was not designed to be an esport. It was not designed to be played competitively like that. But wow, these guys figured out incredible ways to do things that Blizzard never intentionally designed into the game. And, I think a lot of people really, they know that Brood War was important in South Korea, but not to the extent that it really was. I mean, Brood War played a large part in the proliferation of high-speed internet in Korea. Just the initial idea of these PC bongs opening up where you could play, but then people wanting to play in their own homes. And, that was a big deal. Brood War played a huge role in that. And so I really think, like I said, it's a lightning in a bottle situation. Like, Brood War never achieved the same popularity anywhere else, and I don't think we've ever seen an esport that has such a unique regional, fascination with one small area, because South Korea is a very small country.
Yeah.
And StarCraft 2 was obviously designed to kind of try to bring that to the West, and kind of duplicate that in a way. But I think there's a number of factors why StarCraft 2 never caught on the same way. I think, the influx of games like League of Legends, people wanting to play team games, wanting to play with their friends, wanting to play the most popular game that other people are playing. And of course, whether you blame it on Kespa, whether you blame it on Blizzard, there was really an artificial divide that was created between fans of Brood War and fans of StarCraft 2. And I think if you go on a forum like Team Liquid, you still see people that, are pretty much on one side and not the other. They believe that one of them they follow one really seriously, and the other they could care less about. So, with Korea, you did have the big Kespa, you had ESF in the 2010 to 2012 period, which was mostly just guys who were, couldn't make it in Brood War. A lot of, for example, Maru, he played on SK Telecom during Brood War. He was, buried in one of their very low, just training programs. But, he played for SK Telecom, and, he was never going to see pro play. So, he went over to StarCraft 2. MVP was a guy who saw limited success. He went over to StarCraft 2. But by the time you had the big Kespa influx in the end of 2012, start of 2013, so to speak, that was the final year there was a Kespa draft held. So really you had no influx of Korean players after 2013. And the level of competition immediately caused a lot of retirements. A lot of people just didn't like playing StarCraft 2, or or maybe the support wasn't as big for StarCraft 2 as it had been for Brood War. So you had a lot of people dropping out very quickly, and then you have the end of Heart of the Swarm causing a lot of retirements. You have the end of Proleague causing a lot of retirements, and again, it's the same player pool. There wasn't addition. There wasn't new people coming in, so you're just taking a group of 100 people, and then there's obviously arbitrary number. But, one thing happens, and now you have 80, and now you have 60, and now you have 50, and then military service is always the big, issue for players, because, I think the core of esports is kind of putting your life on hold, but you do it to, live a dream. You do it to live this dream of what you wanted to do. And I think that's incredible to be able to, do that. But military is, another thing that puts your life on hold. And so there really is like a time limit on these kind of things. And so I think what we're looking at now is just this natural progression of a player pool that was steadily limited by one event after another. And, that's where we ended up all these years later.
Yeah, 800, and now it's like, oh, I wish we had 100 pros. Even 80 would be amazing.
I mean, I'll be honest, I still enjoy that GSL qualifiers mean something.
Yeah.
I like that, even though I'm a fan of soO, who has missed, who didn't qualify for season 1 or 2 this year, I like that a couple players miss out.
Oh, yeah.
I obviously feel for them because, it's not great for their financial situation.
But competitive spirit, like to feel like qualifying means something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Qualifiers should still hold some weight to them. It shouldn't just be, oh, you're just in the event because you play StarCraft.
Especially now that they call it Code A.
Yeah.
Which is like the bastardization of Code A, but still.
No, yeah, Code A is definitely had some crazy moments to it over the years.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it just didn't become feasible to run it.
Yeah.
But I think even at the height of StarCraft 2 in Korea, which I think is 2015, like SSL ran 16-person tournaments, and you would have events where 11 of the 16 players could reasonably win a championship, but that meant that there were 16 people who normally played in the round of 32 in GSL who were just out from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so I like when there's more weight to the matches. I think it's good and adds the competitive spirit and everything.
Oh, it's definitely more exciting, and it's like more gravitas.
Yeah.
You mentioned being pretty in tune with some of the Korean memes and stuff around StarCraft 2 through your fiance and just involvement with StarCraft. Could you tell us about some?
Yeah. So I just wrote an article recently about the soO versus Flash match and kind of the controversy surrounding Kespa Cup, which of course had nothing to do with the tournament. It's just, that's how, standard embezzlement and, all kinds of stuff like that. I think that there's definitely, we on Team Liquid and by Team Liquid, I mean Western fans, we have our own versions of, our memes. And in Korea, it's the same. And, I think one of the things that I always thought was funny was they had, TY is the perfect example of this. He had a alter ego, John's son, who was the white, less talented version of TY, who would, whenever TY played badly, it was John's son playing. And there were some really outrageous ones, with depicting people, players like Zest, Losira, Alive come to mind, of their own alternate versions. But soO in particular, is a great source of just so much humor. There's a entire, I guess inspired by Naruto and the Hokage or whatever it is. I've never watched the show. But like creating this whole mythology around the people who beat him in the finals. And, I really appreciate like the dedication to, going so in depth with these kind of things. And, as someone who also followed K-pop for a time, like you just give Korean netizens a chance to, you give them a chance and they just go, 0 to 100 really quick.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely been awesome. And, having soO as a friend and having a fiance who lives in South Korea, it's made it easier to get access to these things, whether it's DC Inside forums, whether it's Namu wikis. I encourage people, if they do come across them, to check them out because, now you've auto-translated and a bunch of stuff like that. But it's definitely just like their depictions of some players are different than ours. I think a good example is Alive. It was kind of our invisible guy, if you know what I mean. Whereas Hero was their version of this.
Liquid Hero?
CJ Antis. Because all his, like, a bunch of his tournament wins overlapped with, like, other events that were more notable. And so, like, to them, he was the invisible guy because, it's like everything got overshadowed by something else. So and I enjoy their depiction of SOS as this bat wielding psychopath and stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of cool to see what a different portion of fans who really they can interact with the players on a level we were never able to.
Oh yeah.
So it's really cool to see, kind of what they came up with, and it's all good fun is the great part about it.
For sure. I've noticed a similar sensibility in the Chinese community as I've become, involved with them.
Exactly. It's like a different metagame for the jokes. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to the similar sort of jokes, right? We were talking about comparing the Korean and the Chinese scene. Like Xiaosa, they refer to as poisonous milk.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that was like a puzzling thing for me. I like even using Google Translate as you were talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're just saying that he makes bad predictions.
Okay.
And so the argument was that, at least my understanding of it was that like a player in the Chinese scene has their milk spoiled when he says they're gonna win.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so yeah, no, but and just way more than that. But yeah, the humor in the Chinese scene, similarly, it sounds like to the Korean scene is really out there by Western standards, but also just like like a real sense of camaraderie between them.
No, I think ultimately the difference is just primarily Western fans speaking English. We don't have the same access to the players and the casters and stuff that people who speak to Korean do with the Korean players, and people who speak Chinese with the Chinese players. So I think it's just easier for those kind of things to crop up for those specific types of players from those specific places.
Yeah. So when looking at the history and the legacy of StarCraft, obviously the community is a different place right now than it was in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you value modern tournament victories relative to older ones?
I mean, so, this is a question which could have a million and one, conditions upon it. There's, you could say that, BlizzCon 2016 means less than BlizzCon 2015 because 2015 just had one foreigner, 2016 had 8. You can talk about does the fact that IEM in 2013, I believe, they won SOS beat Hero in, because I believe Zest won in 2014. But it was, does the fact that it was winner take all affect things? Do tournaments prior to KESPA mean more or less? The way I look at it is, I think whenever you reach a certain point, it's the best players in the world versus the best players in the world. And maybe now there's not as many players that you could consider in that category. I think that plays out a lot in like the round of 8 in tournaments. Maybe during the height of the KESPA era, the round of 8 would be more stocked. Whereas now there's like 1 or 2, surprise inclusions. Like, if you had told fans years ago that like DRG was going to make and Ragnarok were going to make like every top 6 in GSL last year, they never would have believed you.
Yeah.
But I still think once you get to a certain point, I mean, is MVP playing Life or MVP playing Squirtle or Maru playing Deer and soO playing Zest, like all these series from the past, is it really much different than, Serral playing Raynor in a final, or, Maru playing Dark or Maru playing TY? It's really, once you get to a certain point, it's just the best in the game playing the best in the game. And so I prefer to look at it kind of from that perspective. I think you really can pick everything apart a million different ways. But at that point, you're just putting so much subjectivity into it that, it's you're never going to reach a consensus amongst people.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Even with simpler topics, that can be pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah.
So, I think we both share a pretty deep love for Proleague specifically among the Korean tournaments that happened. What do you feel made Proleague special specifically relative to the individual leagues?
Yeah, so I think I think you have to start off with the fact that it just began so long ago. We were talking 2005. 2006, 7 being the early years of Pro League. So it's a tradition that, now we look at, say, individual leagues. GSL is the most prestigious because it's been running the longest. It's the most recognizable event. And in a lot of ways, Pro League was a similar thing. It's just, it was an institution that was around super long, despite Kespa's attempts to, sabotage it a couple times. But, Pro League was really special because, let's say you go to a round of 32 match in Codes, and you're a particular fan of, like, CJ. And, there's no hero in the group, let's say. There's no BL in the group. You're kind of, it's just players from other teams, and maybe you're a fan of their play styles, but you don't really devoutly follow them. But with Pro League, you knew every week that you were going to see your team play. You were going to, see your favorite players. And I think also, I think that contributed to, a different type of fandom. And it's actually really interesting. If you go back and watch the VODs of Pro League from, 2015, 14, still somewhat in 16, the loudest crowds you're going to hear are, during the fan chants in Pro League. You have people just screaming back and forth at each other, supporting their teams, and especially for the teams like SKT and KT Rolster and stuff. So that's what I love. I think that's what a lot of people loved about Pro League, was the constant that you were always going to see your team play. And that, the stakes were always kind of high just because of the way the format worked. There wasn't like these early rounds that individual tournaments have. But it's really interesting. I've had the benefit of talking to a few Korean fans over the years, and they all describe Pro League the same way. It was different. It was unlike the individual competitions, and I think, the combination of seeing your favorite players every week, this tradition that dated all the way back to Brood War, and, just a couple other factors that, you really had real rivalries develop over time. And I think that's part of what made Pro League so special. And, not to talk down on the individual leagues, but I don't think they had the same kind of constant level from one game day to another that Pro League had.
If you were to try to recommend a particular season or match or even series to a fan to go back and watch, is there anything that comes to mind for you?
So if you're looking for like a peak rivalry moment, the 2014 Pro League Finals between KT Rolster and SKT is an amazing one. You had this flash parting rivalry that was going on that, manifested itself, I believe, at a Home Story Cup and a couple other events. So that's a great one as far as, seeing like a peak rivalry. I think the 2015 playoffs, where you had the Jin Era versus the CJ matches, have some really iconic moments in them, like the Rogue Baneling drop, the Rogue beating Hero with the Baneling drops, and just the crowd going nuts about that.
Casters.
Yeah, Casters too. Everyone was everyone loved it. And I think there are a few other series, and there's some great moments, like MC coming out of retirement to play for CJ, Creator beating Zest twice in one day, to carry Prime to a victory. Like, that's a really special moment for Creator, and just even to watch him so happy. So I think there's a lot of these cool moments that, kind of happen all over these number of years, and so I would say overall, I think 2014 is the best final. But 2015 is some really cool matches, especially when you get, SOS and all-kill situations, or, maybe you have the billowy all-kill of KT Rolster in the, height of the Blink era and stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of really cool matches in there that people can go back and watch. And just, I personally think Guilty beating TY, Departure beating Hero, those are just great moments where players who really never got in the spotlight all that much, had their like one shining moment. And I think that really validates, your career in a certain way, to be on that stage and to beat a supposedly superior player. And I think that's a really special part of Pro League, lesser players getting a chance to, have their big moment.
Most definitely, and even just like simple things on a week to week basic, like the ace match reveals and stuff like that. There was a level of excitement that you just don't get in individual leagues. It's a very different feel.
Yeah.
But
and I mean, it shows because you've had many team leagues over the year, and WTL is still going. People just like the team leagues. I think it's, you can like players, you can also like the team. So, as I was a Jin Air fan. So whenever Rogue was playing in GSL, or SOS was playing, or Maru was playing, or Cure was playing, like I was definitely watching those guys. And so it was cool in that regard.
Pig Baby? Yeah, not Pig Baby.
Pig Baby, I didn't keep up with him too much, but I do have his signature on a piece of paper that Jin Air sent me. So I gotta respect the guy who's he was part of a team that finished second place in 2015, so not too bad.
For sure. I'm just pulling your leg.
I think he actually played in that final.
Oh yeah.
I think he might have played soO.
I think he had some good games in WTS NA as well and stuff like that. Yeah. I just a funny name to pull.
No, I remember him. It's hard to find too many players I don't remember.
Oh yeah. I think a lot more, especially Pro League players and stuff like that, than me or many other people. So to ask a very specific question that I think, and many other people wonder a lot about, why do you think Maru's success has been so limited to offline Korean events?
I mean, so I'd say first off, he has had some really good moments in non-Korean events. I think the series between him and Life at IEM Taipei, they were the best two players in the world at that point. That's a great series. I guess you could, in 2013 when he played Deer, it was technically at an event where players from all three WCS regions were at. I mean, he has some really just inexplicable losses along the way. But I think the Korean formats are, like the Korean League formats are just more friendly to him. It's Maru can lose a game just like anyone can lose a game. But when he gets to, plan ahead and in a best of 7 series where he's the better player, it's not even like he's coin flipping, every game. He's 60-40 advantage or even higher. So it becomes really, really hard to beat him 4 times out of 7. Which is why I think we've gotten to the point where he's just crushing GSL every season, because there's enough of a gap between him and the next players that, they'll win game or win 2 games or maybe even win 3, but, they're, a 30-70 chance to win. And then as math people know, the probability starts to get really slim really fast. But yeah, I don't know. I think there are some really inexplicable losses in there. Losing to Time, how he did. But there are also ones that kind of make sense in retrospect. He was swept by SOS at BlizzCon in 2018. Everyone knows team kills always have their own weird elements, but SOS takes it to another level. I don't really hold it against him too much. I think, if everything worked like it did on paper, only Cyril and Maru would win events. And that's how it would be, but that's not how it goes. And I don't think it really detracts too much from what he's accomplished, but it definitely is, it's starting to build up over time to be, maybe he should have won a few more tournaments that were, weekenders or, held on foreign soil.
Yeah, I mean, of course he has, a couple great titles outside of Korea. I think what people get most upset about is, as impressive as 8 Star Leagues is, never taking a world title, I think, has a particular negative connotation. I
mean, so if we wanted to go back a bit, I could so 2013, I believe that's the SOS year that he beat
Jaedong on the finals.
Yeah. So I don't remember too much of how Maru did at that one.
Jaedong beat him in the quarterfinals.
And then I guess he beat Deer. Jaedong beat Deer in the semis. So 2014, I think, is where I really start to remember the specifics. So 2014, was the year where only 3 Terrans qualified for Season 1 of Code S. He made like the round of 8. Season 2, only 4 Terrans qualified. He made the round of 4. All the other Terrans were, except for Innovation, who in Season 2 got to the round of 16. Everyone else lost in the first round. So he was far and away the best Terran player, but he didn't do so great in Season 3 and just didn't qualify. 2015 was a very weird one because he beats Rogue in the round of 8 of Season 3 of either GSL or SSL, and then Rogue beats him a couple months later at BlizzCon. And he was so dominant against Rogue. I don't know if I'm making excuses for the guy, but he's had some issues with wrists and stuff, and I think to see that dramatic of a change, probably that has something to do with 2016 he didn't qualify for BlizzCon because he played Zest in Code A of Season 1, and Zest, as most people know, ended up only dropping like 1 match on the way to the finals. He basically just steamrolled that tournament, and Maru gave him the toughest test that entire first half of the year. So just bad luck that he played him in Code A, and then he didn't do too great in the Season 2s. And so you can kind of like point to a lot of specific situations which led to him either not qualifying or not being in a world championship. And even now, like, Serral has a positive win rate against Maru. He actually has a positive win rate against basically every Premier Korean. And so, there are and like Rogue at his peak could beat Maru, TY at his peak could beat Maru, and you really have winning a tournament is super, super hard when you have the best players in the world, so a world championship. And like I said, sometimes it's just these little things. Maybe it happened earlier in the year that make it so you don't qualify, or something that happens later on, or just like 2014 where the meta wasn't friendly for Terra and he wasn't able to make it in. I think you could make, reasonable reasons. Like I wouldn't call them, I don't even think they go into the realm of excuses. But definitely the time loss, that one is completely inexplicable. There's no way he should lose that series. All credit to Oliveira for it. Sorry for using his old ID.
Sure,
it's just when you've written time,
yeah,
hundreds and hundreds of times. But no, credit to Oliveira for beating him. But yeah, I mean, on paper, and even if you look at Oligulac, like that's should not have happened.
He made a lot of weird plays, Maru did.
Yeah, and it's also funny because he was so good in TVT for the rest of the tournament, and I think that's the one that really bothers him.
Yeah.
I think that's the one that, like, if he never does win a world championship, that one will rankle him until, even after he's done playing.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. It's like, in general, to not have 1-1 would be horrible for this otherwise, magical career. But especially losing to somebody that he, I'm sure, feels like he should win 10 times out of 10 against. Like, in a series anyway.
And the results since then have borne out that Maru is a, objectively superior player,
Yeah, I don't even think Oliveira would have argued that.
It was just, sometimes everything goes your way and you play great, and that's what it takes to win a tournament like that. You got to get lucky at certain points. Everybody gets lucky at certain points to win those kind of tournaments. Everybody just gets the perfect build counter, or their medevac is 1 pixel away from being seen. It all comes down to moments like that when you really, if you're going to win a sizable event with great players.
Most definitely. So, starting to wrap stuff up, how do you feel about the overall health of the StarCraft 2 scene?
So, yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. I really like that there's, third-party grassroots tournaments going on. And I think it's interesting because, there are a lot of very ambitious esport ventures out there. A lot of which happen to involve Blizzard, talking about Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, and games that don't involve Blizzard, like Valorant and stuff. And you're seeing that, these teams don't really have a way to monetize the game, and they're paying huge upfront costs to get in, and then they're not really making any money from it.
Yeah.
And so StarCraft, in a way, was always more modest than those things where it's like, oh, you got to pay $25 million to be in the Call of Duty League. And after the dissolution of Pro League, I know for a fact there are teams that still pay very well, even to this day.
Yeah.
And it's definitely enough to make a living on, for sure, solid living on. But I think in an interesting way, this, Blizzard kind of easing off on the support over time, IEM, ESL stepping in to do that, and now a lot of, and the continuous, like this is Master Coliseum 6. There were 5 before it. So I really think StarCraft 2 is in a good place. I think a lot of people are hopeful for Stormgate or, other RTSs in the future, but StarCraft 2 has been the most popular RTS for 13 years. I think there's a real reason for it. And I think, as long as the game, continues, I think there's no expiration date on it. As long as there's people who are interested and there's, tournaments to play in. And I think if you look at the fighting game scene, for a lot of those games, you can see that a community can really keep a game going, even if the creators of the game aren't lending their support anymore monetarily.
Or actively fighting them.
Yeah, of course. So, I don't see an end in sight for StarCraft. And even if one of these upcoming RTSs proves to be super popular, I mean, you can even just look at Brood War. ASL, before the crowdfunding for Code S this year, ASL had a bigger prize than the original allotment for Code S.
Yeah.
And that game's even older.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you have people who are passionate about it, people who are going to watch, people who are going to organize tournaments, people who are going to make videos about the game, who are going to write about the game, people who are going to discuss it on Reddit or Team Liquid or whatever, that's what keeps games going, is that real community, sense of community and sense of, I think there's a certain pride in it also to keep these things going, and because there's a lot of great memories. My personal opinion is, obviously there were a lot of things that we don't have anymore. We don't have Pro League anymore. Prize pools have gone down. But there were a lot of really special moments, and I think there are more to come. And so, I think it's exciting to, with this 3rd season of GSL coming up, and you're going to have another event in sometime in the near future with foreign players versus Koreans, similar to the one Raynor just won. And these are great moments. If you're a fan of the game, it's just great. And so I'm actually surprisingly hopeful. Most people would probably consider me a bit of a pessimistic person, very jaded and disillusioned, but I look forward to the future for StarCraft 2.
Huh. Yeah, no, I think we're 100% on the same page. And it's funny when you mention fighting games. I think I'm not so happy with some of the business decisions Blizzard made that affected StarCraft 2, but they could be Nintendo, and they're not, so that's pretty cool.
No, and I personally have one where there was a patch done 2 days before the semifinal between Stats and soO in, I think it was Season 1 Code S 2018, and I'm like, why would you patch it 2 days before the series? But look, overall, like I said, I still play the game. I still enjoy the game. I think there's issues that come up at the pro level just because people are pushing everything to the limit.
Yeah.
But it's still a fun game, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to play.
Absolutely it is. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time, making the drive. It was really fun having this conversation with you. Any closing words?
No, yeah. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to a few people who played a really important role in me getting into StarCraft 2 writing. Lictor, Cosmic Spiral, Wax Angel. These guys were, very important in me getting better at writing and giving me the freedom to write, about what I want to write about. And I'm not going to tell you guys what, but there's a pretty big project coming up, hopefully in the near future, that we'll give you guys something to discuss and hopefully criticize me for. I just it was really nice to get to talk about some of these things and both reminisce and look forward to the future.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to keep an eye out. But
Yep.
that about does it for us.
Sounds good. Yeah, it was great. Great being here, and it was a lot of fun.
For sure. I feel the same way. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, share it with some friends. It would be a huge help.